Hi there, you're listening to the Guitar Speak podcast, the show produced in Sydney, Australia, where we speak to leading guitar figures from all around the world. My name is Matt Wakeling, and thank you so much for joining me. Now today, we welcome back Terry Wollman for part 2 of our discussion, detailing his incredible 30-plus year career as an in-demand guitarist, composer, and music director in LA. Terry speaks candidly about music directing for both live television and high-profile touring, working with some giants of the music world, namely Jarreau, Stevie Wonder, Dionne, Warwick, and Joe Walsh, just to name a few, overcoming personal adversity, and much more. Terry also talks about his fantastic radio show, Making It with Terry Wollman, which features interviews with world-class musicians and creative professionals. It was awesome to have Terry back to continue our conversation, and let's jump straight into it. All right, Terry, welcome back for part 2 of our conversation.
Thank you, Matt.
Now, where we left off last time, you were saying working in TV toughened you up in the business. Now, I need to clarify, because you've done acting work as well as lots of music directing on talk shows. Which aspect are you talking about?
Definitely music directing on TV. Yeah. My acting experience is more basic, and you basically are there to serve a purpose and hit your marks and, look at the camera, not look at the camera, just take direction from the director.
Sure.
It's not to diminish the challenge of it, but it's not as detailed and as loaded as music directing. When you're playing live and leading a band, there's generally no drama in the acting part, ironically, because you're in the dramatic arts, as I say that. I'm just talking about music directing for television.
Okay.
There are a lot of moving parts.
Right. Sure.
And so it can get, it's easy to miss out on information. Things happen quickly. They're happening at a fast pace, and sometimes you don't get the same information as everybody else on the team, and they're waiting for a piece of music that they forgot to tell you about, or things like that happen.
Okay.
As well as when you're really at a high level of what you do, and all the musicians that have played in my TV bands are world-class musicians. They make it look easy, and they make it look like it's just fun and uncomplicated, and that we're just playing, not just literally, but figuratively, that it looks like there's no effort involved. And I think because of that, people don't take what we do sometimes as seriously, or understand the amount of preparation that goes into making that happen.
Sure.
So, you can just sort of be taken for granted, I think.
Okay.
And they'll only in the way that they might think that, for example, they'll need a piece of music written for a skit or something, and it's only a 1 minute or 3 minute skit. So they can't fathom why it would take an hour to write a piece of music.
Yeah,
that
just
that
play
only
something.
lasts for just play. Play.
Yeah.
Or make it sound like this, but not too much like that. But so there's a craft to making that happen, and they sort of forget that the man behind the curtain, to make it all happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as music director, are you kind of the the advocate for the musicians in a way? You've got these people asking for these perhaps esoteric ideas, and then you've got to convert that into musical language for your band.
Absolutely. Yeah. Being a music director, whether it's for television or for touring, you are sort of an advocate. You're an advocate for the band, of course, and for your fellow musicians, but you're also in a liaison between the artist, the musicians, the record label, the TV network, whoever it is. So you sort of get caught sometimes in the crossfire.
Sure.
of people having different needs and priorities. So
Have,
So,
have you got any examples you are, I don't know, legally bound or able to share or willing
well,
to divulge?
I'll stay more general
Yeah, sure.
because I'm not big on throwing anybody under the
Sure,
bus,
of
but it's
course,
just,
of course.
it's just as to elaborate on what I was just saying before, if they want you to do a piece of music that is 3 minutes long,
Hmm.
that they maybe perhaps forgot to let you know needed to be written, and I'll say, okay, well, give me 15 minutes and I'll work it out with the band, and they say, why does it take 15 minutes? That doesn't make any sense. It's 3 minutes of music. So
Wow.
you find yourself in the middle of a debate about why, you know, why it takes a certain amount of discussion or thought to make something work. And I have never wanted to lower the integrity of what I do or any of the musicians that are with me.
Hmm.
So even if other people that I'm working for don't care
Yeah, sure.
or think that they don't care,
Okay. Okay.
I mean, they might actually care, but they don't understand that if we don't take the 15 minutes to work it out, it's, yeah, look, it's probably going to sound pretty good, but it's not going to sound amazing.
Sure.
And I don't want to settle for anything less than amazing, particularly if I'm making a record or I'm on stage, doing a concert, or I'm in front of a television camera. I want
Sure.
it to be the best it can be always.
Hmm. Now, I've heard music directing described as live producing. Is that a fair connection?
That's I've never heard that, but I absolutely agree.
Uh-huh.
I think that's a great description. Absolutely. Because being a producer uh, means that your job is to figure out how to serve the music and the artist,
Hmm.
and how to make it happen and how to take care of uh, everybody involved, so that it's the best experience it can be for all involved. And, from the creators to the people who are paying for it to the audience, the listener.
Sure. Yep.
So yeah, it's very similar. Music directing and producing. Um, it's a Sometimes it's a fine line between the two, and it's interesting that you're bringing the question up about that, because not all music directors are great record producers, and a great record producer doesn't automatically make for a great music director. But there are some people that are very good at both, and have learned how to straddle the line, and many of the skills are very similar and the same. They cross over.
Hmm.
And then there's certain particular things. For example, when you're producing a record, you want to create an environment and create a world where the artist feels comfortable and you all feel comfortable, the musicians, the engineers, everybody, so you can create this wonderful piece of music. When you're working in television, the goals are different. There's a visual aspect. You're on camera. You need to make sure everybody looks like they're having fun, even
Hmm.
if they're struggling in
Yeah.
some way, or that's not the best choice of word. Even if there's a challenge
Sure.
involved, whatever that might be. If, for example, not having enough time to prepare a piece of music, or they might be sick, or they might just have flown in from Japan, and barely gotten any sleep, and they're on camera. You know,
Yep. Yep.
so they're different. They're sometimes different skill sets, but yes, I would say that music directing is very much like producing for me.
Now, as a producer and a director and a musician, you've worked with some amazing artists. Could I just name a couple of people I'm aware that you've worked with, and maybe you could reflect on that experience?
Sure.
There's such a big list. Where do I start? Al Jarreau, tell me about working with him.
Oh boy, that's a great place to start. I had basically two very memorable experiences with Al. One was back when I was music directing a late night talk show, and Al was the guest artist. So I didn't get to meet him until we were actually at the sound check, or they were doing camera blocking. But I had spoken to him on the phone to talk about what the key and the ending and all that. So, but of course, I was a huge fan of his, and so it was really one of the most remarkable musical experiences that I've ever had, and it was a thrill. It was an absolute thrill, and he was a very um, passionate and daring musician. He just took chances. He would throw himself off a cliff, and one of the things that was the most remarkable. We did two songs on the first. I believe I worked with him on television two times, and then years later, just a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago, we were back in the studio again when I was co-producing Melissa Manchester's 20th record, and Al came in to sing a duet, and it was sort of a circle complete for me, because to get to have an opportunity to reconnect with him and rekindle our friendship and make music together, literally probably 25 years later, was
Wow.
it was breathtaking. Maybe 20 years later, but it was just so great. And also, I'm so grateful because his health had been failing him, and it was one of the last recordings that he made while he was still alive. But when we were on the TV show together, we did whatever his current hit was on the radio, but we also were able to do a second song to close the song off, to close the show, and we did Take Five.
Oh, great.
And yeah, it was really wonderful. And so there are modulations in Al's version of it where he goes up a half step and continues to go up by half steps. and
Okay.
and I said, so how will I know? I just asked him before we did it. And I said, will you cue me? And he goes, yeah, you'll just know. Just watch me. It'll be really clear. You just
Great.
watch me. So fortunately, I told the band, I said, don't watch Al for the cue. Watch me,
Uh-huh.
because I only want there to be one interpretation of what what
Yes.
that
That's a
modulation is.
wise
So
choice. Very
so
wise.
so it's going to be on me. So I will be the interpreter of when we are going to go up to the next key. So just keep an eye on me. I'll keep an eye on Al. Everybody have fun. See you at the end. So, and mind you, the way this was set up, sometimes for talk shows, the band is set on the stage, but the artist might actually be 20, 30 feet away,
Okay.
where
Wow.
where they're fully lit, and then they can get different camera angles, and we still are in a line of sight. We can see each other, quite clearly, or occasionally the camera goes in between because they're not really thinking. They're thinking about getting the shot, and not really thinking about the line of vision between an artist and
Yeah,
and a
sure.
band. However, I kept my eye on Al, and I'm thinking, okay, this is going to happen soon, and I wonder how I'm going to get the cue. And I watch him just sort of lift his shoulder a couple of inches, looking at me, smiling with a twinkle in his eye, and he just sort of lifted his shoulder, like literally 2 beats before the key change.
Uh-huh.
And I went, oh my God, I think that's it. And I just like, my heart almost stopped, and I like whipped around to the band, and I just like put my hand up in the air,
Yeah.
and everybody caught it, and it was like flying,
Yes.
and at that point, the band was like, they did not take their eyes off of me, and I did not take my eyes off of Al, because we modulated a couple more times.
Yeah.
And it was one of the most thrilling, terrifying,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
musically rewarding experiences I've ever had.
Yeah.
So
How
that's Al
exciting.
Jarreau. Yeah, yeah,
Fantastic.
incredible.
You mentioned the Melissa Manchester album. You pulled in a couple of other vocalists that may be well known for that. I'm
That
not.
was, well,
I'm talking about
yes, we
Stevie
did.
Wonder and Dionne Warwick.
And Dionne Warwick,
You
yeah,
must have a
and we also
pretty great Rolodex.
I do, and so, of course, so does Melissa.
Yeah, sure.
Um, uh, I had met Dionne Warwick, you know, um, but never had worked with her before.
Okay.
Just through the years, I had been introduced to her. She's always very lovely. But Melissa knew her because they had done some award shows together.
Okay.
So that when Melissa reached out to Dionne, with me encouraging her to, because we had uh, we were recording a song that had never been recorded before that Melissa wrote with Hal David, and Hal David was the lyricist that worked with Burt Bacharach,
Yeah.
writing
Yeah.
all those remarkable hits
Wow.
that Dionne Warwick sang. She, essentially Dionne was the voice of Burt Bacharach and Hal David.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it was the last song that it's the last lyric that Hal wrote before he died.
Oh, wow.
And Melissa had brought me this tune and played it for me when we were going through possible songs for the record. And I said, you know, this one, this one we need to do really special because it's never been recorded before, and it's let's just get it right. It's because Hal's not here any longer. And so we talked about it, and we ended up getting, I said, I don't want to overproduce this one. I think if it was just piano, bass, and drums with vocals, I'm not even sure if I need to play guitar on it. And then I thought about Joe's sample, because I said, who's the most wonderful piano player that you could think of to do this? And we went through a bunch of names of amazing people, and I mentioned Joe, and she said she would just absolutely love to work with Joe. They had tried before, and it had never worked out schedule wise. So, and Joe was actually quite ill. Um, it was before he had passed away. It was in the last year of his life, and I reached out to Joe and asked him if he felt strong enough. It was something that he was interested in and able and willing to do. And he said, I would love to. It would take my mind off of chemo and, and not feeling well. So we put that together. And then, I thought, well, this would be so perfect in a perfect world. How cool would it be to have Dionne Warwick sing on the track with Melissa? So Melissa reached out to Dionne, and Dionne said yes. So she came to the studio, and it was another remarkable experience. Absolutely remarkable. So, um, regarding Stevie Wonder, I didn't know Stevie, uh, and Melissa had met him through the years, but wasn't really sure how to reach him. I mean, she had reached out to management and everything, we weren't hearing back in a timely manner, or we would, they would say, yeah, he's interested, he'll get back to you. And, we were getting towards the end of the record, actually.
Uh-huh.
We were starting to mix. A really good friend of mine named Myron Bernard knew Stevie. They kind of came up together in Detroit, and Myron just called him and said, hey, my friend's working with Melissa Manchester. They'd love to see if you want to be on the record. And next thing we knew, he was in the studio with us. Yeah.
Man, what do you do? What do you do when Stevie Wonder turns up to sing on your track?
Well, he didn't sing on this one. We brought him in to play harmonica,
Oh, okay. Okay.
because there was a featured harmonica part on the record, and it was chromatic harmonica, not blues.
Beautiful.
And
Yeah, yeah.
and once again, I said to Melissa, well, look, let's start at the top of the list. There's Toots Tillman, who's not around anymore, and
Yeah.
Stevie Wonder, and I have a friend, Talik Olstead, that lives in Europe, who's amazing. And so we reached out to Stevie. By the way, we set up vocal mics and we mic the piano just in case.
Okay.
The spirit moved any of us.
Yeah.
But the main thing was to get him to play the harmonica part, and anything else was going to be icing on the cake. And what do you say to Stevie Wonder? That's a great question. He came in. We, I was introduced to him. He spent a little time with Melissa. Then I went back into the studio, while he was getting ready. And then he came in, and he sat down next to me in the control room before he went out, in the studio to play. And he said, well, let me hear the track. But before you play the song for me, he said, I'm pretty sure that you have something in mind for me to play, or you wouldn't have asked me to be here. So I really want to know what it is that you need from me.
Uh-huh.
And I thought that was incredible.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated him saying that. He said, yeah, just, let me know what you need. and what you want, and we'll get that to happen. And we did, and that again, it was surreal. I mean, look, for me, it was a thrill, but it's sort of you know you focus on the work when you're doing it,
Mhm. Yeah.
but part of the experience is absolutely surreal when Stevie went out in the studio and started playing, or when Dionne, Warwick, or Al Jarreau, or Joe Sample, or any of these people, when they start playing and you hear that sound that's you grew up with.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Wow.
hear Stevie Wonder playing the harmonica,
Yep.
and it took me right back to being, a kid, and listening to him when he was a kid, singing and playing My Cherie Amour.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that, so it's like it's in your DNA, when you hear it. And there's something that's just surreal and mind-boggling about that, when that sound and that energy, gets transposed onto this piece of music that you're creating. When those two roads merge together, it's divine, and it's really amazing. I mean, I can't think of a better way to explain that experience. And it was, the funny thing is, it was actually the same way for Melissa Manchester.
Okay.
I mean, that I experienced that when Melissa Manchester sang on my record, but when Melissa and I were in the control room looking through the glass at Dionne Warwick or Al Jarreau or Stevie adding their parts, she just looked at me with her mouth again, just her jaw dropped open, and she just looked at me wide-eyed like a little kid. And here's a seasoned artist who has been a superstar in her life
Yeah. Yep.
as
Yep.
well. She's traveled the world and sung in sheds and stadiums, and here she's experiencing the same thing I am, which is just um, the thrill and the surreal um, amazement of what's actually happening, and how great it sounds, and how wonderful it feels. It's remarkable. Those kind of experiences make me so grateful. That I've remained dedicated and worked so hard. To get to where I have these opportunities.
How about just shifting gears? How about Joe Walsh? What was your connection there?
When and again, it was the very first talk show that I music directed, called The Late Show, which seems to be a pretty popular name for late night talk shows. But at the time, it was my first time really working in television. It was in the late '80s, and it was on Fox. It was a national 5-day a week talk show that I music directed, and one of the many guests was Joe Walsh, and I got to spend the afternoon with him, uh, and just and play a song with him. And it was, as a matter of fact, I don't even think I played on that one. I think I did the arrangement and conducted, made sure everything stayed on track, and
Mhm.
kind of led the band on that. But that was a thrill. It was an absolute thrill. And uh, just a few years ago, my girlfriend Melanie Taylor was singing. She joined Joe Walsh's band and went on tour with him. So I got to re-meet Joe, and
Okay.
he couldn't have been lovelier. He was really um, extremely nice, and sounded like he sang and played so amazing. But I reminded him that we had met many, many years ago, and that we had done a TV show together. And he basically, in a very mischievous way, said, there's a lot of things I don't remember back in the '80s, but it's nice to meet you again. But it was great. It was fantastic working with him. It was, yeah, because that was another example. Nobody sounds like Joe Walsh.
Mhm. Very cool. I mean, I could go all day asking about people you've worked with, but that's excellent. I think um, one of the great ways to follow up your connection with people is your radio show, which I only just recently discovered. I had no idea you were doing a radio show, Making It with Terry Wollman, where you talk with so many incredible musicians and composers
Yeah.
and actors. How long have you been doing that for?
I, I believe it's been about a year and a half or going on 2 years.
Okay,
Uh,
great.
it's been fairly recent,
Yeah,
and it's a weekly show. I love doing it because having the opportunity, and I know you can relate because you're on the other side of the mic, you get to speak with really fascinating people from
yeah,
around the
yeah,
world, and it's so interesting to me to spend an hour with an artist and just talk to them about not just about their art but their life and their perspective and point of view and what their journey has been, and I'm a really curious person, and I'm a fan as well of these people, but I also I really like having the opportunity to share their stories and their point of view from both for fellow musicians, our peers that are going to enjoy it and learn some things,
hmm
hopefully, but also the fans who get to see a more personal side of artists that they've been a fan of. And then also there's the mentoring aspect of the next generation of up and coming musicians and artists. I want them to have an opportunity to hear these stories, and really get an idea of what's really truly important in life, not just how fast you can play,
hmm That's very
or how much money you make, or any of those things. It's really about having a good life along the way and treating people well,
yeah. Well,
with kindness and respect and integrity. So so the show is called Making It with Terry Wollman, and I we're on the air every Wednesday, 3 to 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time in the United States. But you can also hear all of the episodes for free. You can download or stream them at entertalkradio.com, or you can go to iTunes to the podcast section and look up Making It with Terry Wollman. So there's really incredible conversations that I've had with people, and I encourage everybody, all of you, to go take a listen. By the way, they're not just musicians. There's some business people,
hmm
there's music attorneys and managers and radio promo people, and even outside of music, actors and publishing people, and just anything that I think would be of value to myself and you and all of us, that information that would be entertaining and interesting.
Very cool. Yeah, I loved it. And the whole podcast platform is so great because yeah, otherwise down here in Australia, I'd have no way to access that. But yeah, I've just subscribed through iTunes and
Great,
loving it.
great.
So I played the Michael Thompson one the other day. That was fantastic. The
Yes.
session guitar
Yeah.
legend, and one I've loved so much was with Abe Laboriel. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
oh man, what a musician! I first became aware of him on some gospel albums in the early 90s. And
hmm
um, man, his playing is full of so much joy. And then to hear his life story was fantastic.
his story is fascinating because he grew up in Mexico City,
hmm
and he's a black musician, but who speaks fluent Spanish with a Mexican accent. So it's there it turns out is a large community of black uh, families that live in Mexico that are born in Mexico, uh, and that's their culture. But I had never met anybody who wasn't lighter skinned,
Okay.
uh, from Mexico. And but I met Abraham in 1981, the first year that I moved to LA, because he worked with the Crusaders, and he was playing on all those records, and that's how Abraham ended up playing bass on my very first record and has played on all of my records.
Oh wow,
Um,
fantastic.
he's been a, he's become a very dear friend. I love him. He's one of the most remarkable musicians on the planet, and his story is fascinating. It really is. That might be a good one to start with if you go
Yeah, it's
listen to the
pretty great.
podcast. Yeah, yeah, he's got some really wonderful and funny stories.
Yeah. I learned something on that show about you. One thing I love about your interview style, with the few episodes I've heard of, there have been moments when I thought, well, Terry could jump in here. Terry has done this or that, but you leave a lot of space for your guests. You're very, um, even though you've walked many of the same roads some of your guests have, you always leave it
Hmm.
wide open to them, which is fantastic. But you did mention, you were talking about Abe Laboriel missing part of his index finger on the
His
left
finger.
hand, and you mentioned your
Yes.
hands
Yes. Yeah.
through a bicycle accident. What happened there, and how has that impacted you as a musician?
Um, well, it's impacted me profoundly. I had a bicycle accident in when I was in my 30s, my mid 30s to late 30s, when I was living. I was already living here in Los Angeles, and it was a regular. It wasn't a motorcycle. It was bicycle,
Hmm.
and I wasn't on a trail. I was just riding on the road. And as a matter of fact, ironically, I was riding to a recording session to do some overdubs, and my guitars were already at the studio, and it was only a mile or so from where I lived. And I've always been very physically active, exercising whenever there's an opportunity, and whether it's the gym or if I could ride instead of drive my car, I would. And that was one of those times. It had been raining, and there was some oil on the road and on some railroad tracks that I was crossing, and I slowed down. I grew up on a bicycle. Growing up in Miami, we rode bikes everywhere, and it rained all the time. But I didn't understand that the roads were different in Florida than they were in California. They were made from different materials. And so in Florida, the after it rains, the roads just dry out. They're not slippery. Here, they retain um, moisture and oil and everything. So what I did was, being safe, I just slowed down. I was only going about as fast as you would be walking, and I crossed the first set of railroad tracks, and I was fine. And I just thought, let me just slow down. There's railroad tracks. I want to be careful. The second set of railroad tracks, the bike just flew out from under me. It hit some oil, the front tire, and it's as if somebody had yanked the back tire out from under me. I immediately was on the ground. I landed on my chin. I shattered my two front teeth and came very close to breaking my neck. I thought it was broken because I hit incredibly hard. And once I realized that I was on the ground on the road, lying on my face, I also couldn't feel anything. And that terrified me because I thought this should really hurt. And I couldn't feel anything. So I thought that I maybe had broken my neck and was paralyzed, and I
Wow.
wasn't sure. And I laid there for what seemed like a few minutes, and I don't know if it was or wasn't. No cars stopped. It was still drizzling, and it's a sad um, reflection of society when you see somebody lying in the road and you don't pull over, to
Yeah, yeah.
call or help or anything, and nobody was really paying attention. And so um, I very slowly started wiggling my fingers to see if I could move my hands, and I could. And then I started to. I knew that if you have a neck injury, you need to really be careful, but I also needed to get out of the road. Um, so I sort of lifted my face off of the pavement, and pieces of teeth started falling out of my mouth. And so I that was horrifying. And I basically slowly just got up and realized that I could move. And so I managed to get up and picked up the bike and leaned on it. And I was only a few blocks from my house. So I basically very slowly just leaned on the bike and made my way home, and then went inside, and then I actually called my cousin, who was a doctor, and he wanted me to go to the emergency room. And but I essentially had a concussion, contusions, shattered teeth, and I came very shy of breaking my neck, but I damaged the vertebrae in my neck. And they ended up, over the next year, essentially disintegrating. And so I had to have a spinal fusion in my neck. And trying to make this as short of a story as possible, but it's, you know, it was a big moment in my life. And so I ended up about a year after the accident, or 9 months after the accident, I had spinal surgery. But during those 9 months, I started to lose feeling in my hands, and I was getting a lot of pain, shooting pain, and my neck was getting worse. And I had been traveling and performing a lot, and it was starting to profoundly impact my ability to play, besides the pain and the numbness. So when I was finally able to get the insurance company to approve surgery, it turned out that my surgery was successful. They put a titanium plate in my neck. I had this amazing doctor, Dr. Robert Bray. I'm forever grateful to him. And but there was already nerve damage in my hands, in both of my hands, and I had went to physical therapy, acupuncture. As a matter of fact, a year after surgery, I even started studying karate as part of a way to regain the feeling and get more mobility. And I went to, again, acupuncture and everything, Eastern and Western medicine. And I was basically told that when the when you get nerve damage, sometimes you don't ever fully recover from it. And that turned out to be the case for me. So even though my neck was better, the insurance company dragging their feet had taken too long for me to get surgery. So I couldn't play guitar for about a year. I basically could play for about 5 minutes, and then I would just get completely numb again. And I worked my way up to 10 minutes and 15 minutes and an hour, and eventually I basically just realized that I was never going to completely heal from this injury, that my hands were always going to be numb to some degree, and I might as well do what makes me happy, and see if I can figure out how to play guitar again, and do it for sustained periods of time, and make records, and get it back to pro level. And I did. It meant that I might not necessarily be able to play as fast as other people, but there's more maybe depth, or the intention for every note that I play. They mean more to me. So my hands are always constantly in some state of numbness. The kind of that feeling like when you fall asleep on your hands and wake up and they're sluggish. And so that's that story.
Wow, that's huge. I mean, for anyone in any field, but for a musician, that's a huge challenge. And wow, props to you for pushing through and continuing to make amazing music.
I really appreciate that. And by the way, just to cap that, I had something that really completely put it in perspective for me. There was I spent a year touring with Kev Moe in his band, the wonderful blues artist. And Kevin had asked me to join his band, and we were traveling, and we were doing an outdoor concert in Seattle, Washington. And I remember on my side of the stage in the audience, there was a young man in a wheelchair, and I could see him because he was in the aisle. So, he stuck out, visually. Yeah. But the interesting thing about him, he was a quadriplegic. It turns out he only had feeling or movement in a couple of fingers, or one finger in one hand, but from the neck up. But from the neck up, he was nodding his head and bobbing in time to the music with a big grin on his face. And I could see him because he was on my side of the stage. So he really caught my attention because his sense of rhythm was really strong. And I was very curious about him. Plus, he was having a great time.
Yeah.
And so I ended up meeting him after the show, and I went up and talked to him, and we started talking, and I said, I can't help but notice that, you have this really great sense of rhythm. And he said, well, I was a musician before my accident. And he said, he had an accident when he was in high school and ended up being paralyzed. And I said, I have a neck injury also, but nowhere nearly as bad as yours. And he said, "What's your injury?" And I said, "I had a bike accident, C5, 6, and 6, 7 with a spinal fusion." He said, "Oh, we have the exact same injury, except mine was just probably another millimeter worse than yours."
Oh, wow.
So that really that framed it
Yeah.
for me, because you kind of think, well, maybe I could have broken my neck, or and you don't want to feel like you're sounding melodramatic or anything like this, but you think of those things, they scare you, they're
Yeah.
real possibilities. But he put it in perspective,
Mm.
because I almost did end up paralyzed. And so he said, "Look, it's great that you can play, and I absolutely think it's wonderful. You need to do this, and you should talk about it. You should let people know about it, because it might help some other people." So short question, long answer.
Well, it's a big answer. I would say,
Yeah.
yeah. So Terry, you are heading, almost into your fourth decade of professional music.
Mhm.
How has the business changed over that period since your first tour with Billy Preston back in '81? Has it changed intrinsically, or is it still the same kind of idea, or how do things look for you today?
I think the thing that's changed the most is that it's just even harder to make a living as a musician, and it was challenging when I started.
Okay.
Uh, and I think that's because um, the obvious, because record sales are close to non-existent.
Yeah.
I mean, people still buy records, but that's why buy it when you can get it for free is the new paradigm.
Yes.
And there's a whole generation of younger people, and probably people that are like, when I say that, I mean like under 30, maybe even 40,
Hmm.
that really never spent they never bought records because they could stream them. It's been going on for a long time. So they don't understand that there's intellectual property, and that there's a value to that. And so it certainly makes it harder to finance records. And I would say, for as a person who loves making records, that's one of the most profound changes. Other than that, I look, yeah, there are a lot of people making music now that don't play instruments, and I'm not superimposing a judgment on that. It's just a statement.
Hmm.
Some people that do it are great, some are not, but all in all, there's still, to get really good at being a musician, it still takes the same amount of discipline and dedication and passion. So that hasn't changed. That's the same.
Okay. Yeah, you see these amazing players on YouTube or wherever, and yeah, they're still getting to their 10,000 hours. They're still somewhere on the journey. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah, putting it together, very cool. And if we can just turn this interview full circle, we started talking about No Problem. What does the future hold with you? You said you had such a great time putting that track together. Would that be perhaps part of an album, or what else have you got in the
It
pipeline?
is. It actually is. I made an edit of it for radio, that actually cut out a piano solo. So
Okay.
there's an extended version of the song,
Yeah.
as well as the possibility of mixing it as we recorded it without the additional rhythm guitar parts. So, in the more raw rock form. But um, yes, I already see that as being a part of my next record.
Okay.
I
Great.
just had a conversation actually yesterday with the bass player Hussein Jeffrey, who basically said, "That was so much fun. When are we going back in the studio
Ah,
again
that's
and doing
great.
another song?" So something, I'm thinking about my next record. I've been writing, the past year, and I'm always writing, but getting ideas and thinking about concepts and collaborations and things that I might want to do. But I'm also thinking about continuing to put out some singles,
Hmm.
maybe just some one offs that would at later on be part of a collection,
Okay. Yeah.
with additional new music. So there's more music coming down the pike, and I'm looking forward to getting back in the studio.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
And Terry, what's the best way for people to keep up to date with everything you're doing?
The very best way is my website, because it's changing every day, and and it's terrywollman.com, TerryWollman.com. Everything funnels through that website and Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and there's videos and there's direct links to iTunes and CD Baby, and there's a blog page. It's very deliberately the one stop for where to find out anything about me and what's going on, and you can even contact me, through the contact page. So I would go there, or just go to iTunes and Google me, or just Google me. Yep. You'll find out more about me than I already know about myself.
That's great. Yeah, you are a rare breed of someone who keeps their webpage up to date, which is incredible in this day and age when you can just Facebook everything.
It's not for the faint of heart, but I have I have a really wonderful web designer who also is the photographer and graphic designer for my records. Her name is Leanna Ringstad, and she lives in Sweden. And then she spends part of the time here in the States, and she's been pushing and prodding and getting me to understand the importance of continuing to write new content and send things to the website, and then she manages the information. So again, it takes time, but it's important, and it's a great way for me to allow for friends and fans to stay current with things that I'm doing and things that I'm thinking about. And, as a matter of fact, it just reminds me, like, I need to link my radio show to my website. We haven't even done that yet. So there's always more to do to stay on top of everything. I just realized there's not even a making it link, on the Terry Wollman page. So I'm embarrassed to say. So I think I'll be probably emailing Leon after this show.
Man, you wear many hats, so the fact that maybe one of them's not there yet, I think that's okay. But
well, I'm pretty good at forgiving myself and accepting my shortcomings, because there's only so many hours in the day, and I want to spend as much of that playing music as well. Very cool. Not just writing and talking about it.
Excellent. Well, Terry, thank you so much. I've loved meeting you and talking about your career. Thank you for sharing so candidly and openly about an incredible career that has lasted many years and is burning brightly as ever by the looks of things. So, I just so appreciate your time and your openness over these couple of conversations.
Something, Matt, it's been wonderful, and I'm really enjoying that we're on opposite ends of the globe, but we are so connected and through our music, and it's been an absolute pleasure to be on your show. Thank you.
All right, there you go, my conversation with Terry Wollman, and what a gentleman and incredible musician and an incredible career. So it's so great to hear all those stories, and as I said, I really appreciated Terry's honesty talking about some really hard issues in this episode and also in the first part of our conversation. If you haven't heard that is episode 84 of the Guitar Speak podcast. You of course are listening to number 86. In between we had Michael Sweet from Striper. Lots of good stuff coming up in the show as well. The Sydney Guitar Festival's coming up. We should be speaking to a number of the guests from that festival. Also, Dave Leslie from the Baby Animals. I spoke to him about a week or so ago, and that episode will be coming up soon as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or the other 9 billion places you can get podcasts these days. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and you can support us on Patreon. All right, my name's Matt Wakeling. You've been listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll talk to you next time.